Namaste. Territoriality is a biological trait which we the humans have taken to a different dimension altogether. That is the reason why historically, while we have been fighting for the patch of land on the earth, we have also developed the courage to go beyond it as well. 50 years ago, when the Apollo series got Neil Armstrong to conduct that giant leap of the mankind, hardly did we know that that was going to be a short-term success. With Apollo 17 in 1972, after having carried 12 humans to land on the moon, US had possibly achieved through that series of missions what they wanted to. A geopolitical gesturing of being dominant, because they had decided the finish line for the space race that initiated back then. We have come to the same point again, when interestingly what we are witnessing across the world is the fight for dominance for the patches of land possibly on the earth all around. And at the same time we are going to witness history being repeated tonight as I record this lecture with Artemis II, another series of NASA's mission this time to take the humans back to the moon again after 5 decades. This would be followed by the Artemis III, 4, 5, whereby NASA has officially made it clear that this time these are not going to be solo missions, but an attempt towards making a base camp on the moon, not only to stay there for a longer period and maybe do explore and extract the bounties the moon has to offer, but also to use it as a possible springboard for taking the humans to Mars ultimately. Quite ambitious. We are going to be discussing the different signs and the challenges associated with it. We will also bring in the geopolitical aspects. We will look into some of the aspects of India into this. Where do we find ourselves organized into that entire network? And what could be the way forward? People, as I record the lecture here, and as you witness on the background, the SLS launch vehicle, the most capable launch vehicle and the only one possibly that we have that can take the humans on a trans-lunar orbit, an orbit that could take the humans towards the moon. The 4 astronauts who are getting ready for this mission are going to be the lucky ones who would not see the moon in as much entirety as they would witness the earth rise, as the term is. Only the lucky get to have this phenomenon getting observed. Anyway, so what is this mission? Before that, let me quickly show you some of the snapshots of the Apollo series which carried the humans back then, the lander and the one that carried the human and then returned them back into the orbit to be brought back into the earth, whereby we established the human endeavor can take us places. NASA had also left, other than their flag of US, this plaque on the lander's staircase, reading here, "Men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon. We came in peace for all mankind." However, despite the tall claims, the debate always remains for this being more motivated by the geopolitical realities than the scientific realism and actual need of the hour. But this time the case might be a little more different, even if the geopolitical nature of it cannot be discounted even today. People, we will be, after having conducted the successful Artemis I mission in November of 2022, wherein the Orion spacecraft, the biggest and the most capable and most advanced human carrying spacecraft that we have had so far, built under Lockheed Martin, US, was taken around the moon and was brought back into the earth in a free return trajectory, as it is called. People, the free return trajectory, which would be exam important as well, simply means that even if the inbuilt infrastructure fails, the capsule will automatically, under the influence of the gravity, would be brought back to the earth, which is also what was conducted in Apollo 13, which could not be completed successfully. But fortunately, the people were brought back healthy and hearty. So after having conducted the Artemis I mission at around 3:50 at night, which will be by calendar the 2nd of April, what we will witness is Artemis II take off from the launch pad 39B of Kennedy Space Center, Florida, where SLS, the powerful rocket, would take off the Orion in its crew module fairing cone and give it the orbit. After few minutes into it, the launch vehicle will detach, and with the cryogenic propulsion system that is a part of the Orion to begin with, we'll give it a propulsion at this position 3, as you see, to give it a bigger, orbit. This bigger orbit will allow the positioning of Orion to enter into trans-lunar injection, as it is called. The position number 4 is the one that ICPS, the cryogenic propulsion system, will give the final push, and there will be a detachment. The cryogenic propulsion system will detach. I'll show you some of the images to suggest that. And the Orion spacecraft will then launch into the trans-lunar orbit for almost a 4-day journey till the moon. But that Orion spacecraft, once it reaches around the moon, this is the most important phase, which is at a distance of nearly 10,000 kilometers from where the Orion spacecraft would make the most detailed observation of the far side of the moon. Interestingly, this is also the risky phase with respect to the communication. This is the point wherein our 4 astronauts would not be able to communicate with the Earth, also called as the communication blackout. But as I told you, this is a free return trajectory. So nothing much to worry on the perspective of them returning back, because this will automatically be designed back to be brought back to the Earth. In that entire stage, there are few scientific testing would be conducted. What all things? By the way, by the time you have reached here, you've already crossed 4 days. And T5 starts somewhat here, wherein at T5, your Orion would be closest to the moon, maybe somewhat around 7,000 kilometers, and it would have got guided into a return journey. But before that, what all things would have got tested already? Your SLS in its ability to put the Orion into a trans-lunar orbit. Second, you would also be testing multiple detectors, which is going to be a part of the Orion spacecraft, like the radiation detectors, the functional unit inside, the emergency system, and the communication system, the navigation system. And one most important thing that Orion would do at this particular position when it is almost into the trans-lunar injection, people, is it will do what is called as proximity maneuvers, whereby the Orion spacecraft would, I'll just show you, the Orion spacecraft would turn itself and try to do what is called as a rendezvous, coming extremely close to the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, ICPS, as I told you, so that it will do the same maneuvers later when in Artemis III it will have to do the docking in the space. That docking would be very crucial for the landing mission on the moon, which I'll be briefly touching upon towards the end. So people, this, as you can see in the image, here are some of the spacecrafts that historically have carried humans or are presently also active. This is the Apollo. This is the Soyuz, which has been active for a very long time, that is of Russia. This is the Boeing spacecraft, which, if you remember, recently Ms. Sunita Williams got stranded on International Space Station because of a leakage detection. But by the replacement one, she was brought back. This is the Boeing Starliner. This is the Shenzhou of China. And this is our Orion spacecraft. This Orion spacecraft This is the one wherein the humans are present, and then there is what is called as the service module, which will ultimately detach once the Orion is going to be returning back. People, despite you taking so many days, this is a journey of overall 10 days, the stay around the moon is not going to be more than half an hour. So for that little half an hour, the entire program has been planned. It is this phase. And then it will start on the return journey. People, as it starts on the return journey, the astronaut Victor would then start on the manual piloting mode, and from there it will start getting manually piloted, and that also is for a rehearsal for the later stage. Now on the return back, the next big challenge appears at the time of re-entry, because the speed that the Orion spacecraft will acquire would be on the higher side of over 40,000 kilometers, and at that speed the entry of the Orion spacecraft would generate the temperature over 2700 degrees centigrade, nearly half of what we have on the surface of the sun, minded. Which means the Orion spacecraft would also be testing the specific material which the lower part of the Orion spacecraft is layered with, called as avcot. This avcot material, AVCOT, avcot is a silica based material which is also called as the ablative material, which is quite tolerant of the extreme heat that it generates. You should also remember this with respect to Gaganyaan mission, wherein our crew module would also be requiring to have the materials which are highly thermally stable and would hence have the relevance for the examination as well. So this ablative material is something that will resist or shield rather against that high temperature, after which they will enter into the atmosphere and would fall on the western coast near California using the parachutes slow down, only to be collected immediately by the Navy, NASA teaming up towards the same. Now people, coming to the ultimate goal that NASA has through this. Please remember that earlier it was decided that NASA is going to be creating, after Artemis II, their orbiting station on or around the moon, something to be called as the gateway. Alright, so the gateway. It was this gateway which was planned to be orbiting around the moon, to which in the subsequent mission the Orion would go and dock itself, fit itself, before the landing part of it taking care of the rest, so that the humans could get down on the moon. Very recently, you can see just a week back, NASA's Lunar Gateway Space Station is out. So what NASA has decided that it is going to be economically non-viable to have a station and then go to the land on the moon. They are going to create rather a base camp on the moon. So this is the ultimate goal, and for doing that, in Artemis III, they will be doing the docking of the Orion around the moon, which would be a lander that will take the humans to the moon surface. In Artemis IV, they will attempt the landing, and Artemis V onwards, the permanent base station work would practically be starting. Let us look into what are the various challenges associated with these missions, because I told you that the ultimate goal would be to take the humans to the Mars as well. So for all these long plan that we have, what are the challenges associated? But before that, just to tell you people, who are the 4 members who are going into this mission? The names, 3 are Americans, 1 with African origin, and another 4th fellow is the Canadian. Reed Wiseman, who is the commander of this mission, Victor Glover, who is the pilot, Christina Koch, who is the mission specialist. Interestingly, she also happens to be the lady with the maximum consecutive number of days of stay in the space, which is near about, I think, 327 days. And Jeremy Hansen, who is going to the moon for the first time, and of course to the space for the first time. And these are the 4 people who are there as a part of the team. And as I told you, this is also kind of a gesturing on a different level of symbolism other than the scientific aspect of it. So there is a lot of popularity given to the fact that Christina Koch will become the first woman to land on the moon, and Victor Glover to become the first black astronaut to fly around the moon, which in itself is a bit uncomfortable presentation, but so be it. So this is, as they say, to create a gesture of bringing your anti-racist ideology. So what they are now planning is to have the moon base. Now, just one little thing, people, before we start into the challenges part. You see, there is one common trend from where again there could be a question asked. What is zero gravity indicator? In all these missions, when they go to the space, they carry a device, generally a soft toy or something, which the moment it gets into the zero gravity, as they enter into the space, it starts floating around and it indicates that they are in the space, which could be a very logical, curiosity generating as to don't the visitors themselves get to know that they are feeling weightless. Well, there are multiple complexities associated. To put it in simple terms, they are strapped to their chair, and then the cognition is going through a complex situation, the mental cognition. So having this indicator gives them a quick understanding of the arrival of the zero gravity situation as such. So if you remember, in the Axiom 4 mission, which carried our wing commander Mr. Shubhanshu Shukla, there was this soft toy, or rather a swan by the name Joy, that went up. Then Snoopy also got to go in the Artemis I mission, and this time there is this little device by the name Rise. Interestingly, that was made by or designed by a 2nd grader student, and that has also got a micro SD card with the names of all the people who within a particular timeline NASA invites are getting their names sent in the digital format. Anyway, coming to what are the challenges associated? What are the challenges associated with these human space missions? There are multiple. One, of course, is the gravity. You see, when you are in the low Earth orbit, for example, International Space Station, you are in a near zero gravity or microgravity condition. Going to the lunar surface will subject you to nearly 1/6 of the gravity as that on the Earth, and going to the Mars, if at all in future, would again subject you to 1/3 of the gravity, whereby we understand that moving around in the space to the different celestial bodies, our body has to be subjected to the different gravity conditions, which is quite challenging to the body functioning itself. It impacts your entire physiology. Every aspect of the human functioning is directly impacted by and associated with gravity. And hence, the bone issues, the muscle issues, the cognitive issues, the hormonal issues, all of these come in. The other challenge, of course, is the confinement itself. It's quite a challenge to be confined in a tiny chamber, having left the Earth for a long stretch of time. And with the goal of sending to the Mars altogether, you can imagine it would be the journey involving few months. The smallest of the Mars mission, people, would include the number of days, which is more than what is the maximum number of days in the space ever achieved by the human. So we can understand that it is going to be quite a tall order in future. The another issue that happens with the human space missions is the signal latency. So while people staying in the International Space Station don't generally experience much of latency because it is in the low Earth orbit, somewhat around 400 kilometers, and hence they are quite normally communicating with the people of their family and on the Earth with the space station. But as you go farther and farther, obviously that would become a difficult thing. If you are going to the moon, the communication duration, latency is generally around to and fro 2.5 seconds, but with the entire infrastructure and the communication setup, it generally goes beyond 10 seconds of signal latency. So communication becomes quite a challenge. And then you can imagine going into the Mars, it will be a matter of few minutes. So practical communication on a real time would become extremely difficult, and that would be a major challenge to have a sustenance on the Mars with the connection on the Earth. Next issue that we have to face is that of the health. So there, for any health issues, you have to manage within the limited resources, because again, with the signal latency and the resource mobilization that could be conducted is going to be a severe limitation. Next, people, the resource itself. I mean, how much resources could you carry? Somewhat around 6,000 kgs plus is required, of the stuff to be carried for just 4 people for a matter of month. And hence, as you go farther and farther, regular transport of the materials would become extremely difficult. And that is where comes an extremely important exam relevant concept of what we call as in situ resource utilization. ISRO, UPSC could ask a question on this. So when we are going on to the moon, people, we have to look for the presence of water, which by all the scientific missions that have been conducted so far, our Chandrayaan included, has also evidenced the presence in good quantity. Around 10 gigatons of water is a gross estimate that we have in the South Pole. And that water has to be looked at from different perspective. From it being portable application for drinking purpose, another splitting it to generate oxygen. It is extremely important to remember that a Perseverance rover which is there on Mars, that of NASA, had conducted an experiment called MOXIE, which had split CO2 to generate oxygen on a very tiny scale. But they are looking at avenues as we go to a new place, how to utilize the resource present over there itself. Because you cannot have a regular communication. So many say that the Mars could be a one-way traffic. Now, so this oxygen for human usage, as well as the H2O through electrolysis, could be split into what we can call as the fuel mix. Because hydrogen and oxygen, they make for the fuel mix that is used in the cryogenic propulsion system. Only then can we think of making the bigger jumps from the moon maybe towards the Mars. Other than that, you are also looking for helium-3, which is a good source of nuclear fusion to be conducted again for the energy perspective. Next, to look for the rare earth metals. Well, this is something which is equally important to be brought back home as well. So you see the importance of rare earth in the different segments of applications. So in the earlier discoveries, or let us say the Apollo series, they brought the soil, what is called as the lunar regolith. Regolith is thus the dusty material created because of the hitting of the meteors on the moon surface to have created the powdery substance. And what they have found, people, is the presence of potassium, the rare earth elements, and phosphorus, which is called as creep. So this creep has been found, and the recent released document by, in US, it talks about how they are planning to go for the creep extraction from the place. Anyway, so ISRO is going to be extremely important. Other than that, the simple challenge is like you now have to work for an architecture of technology, because it's not going to be solo missions like the Apollo. So you have to have multiple launches to create one functional, establishment, and that would require a very holistic collaboration between the private sector as well as the state. And that is why in US, these companies, Blue Origin, SpaceX, Axiom, they are all partnering in this Artemis mission towards developing the landers and the extravehicular activity suits as they are called, EVA suits. Extravehicular activity. So when you walk out, you have to be well protected. And that is what that thing brings us to another challenge. People, one of the biggest challenge when we go beyond the low Earth orbit, please remember, because as long as we remain in the low Earth orbit, let us say International Space Station, the high frequency radiations like UV rays are the risk that you have to be protected against. But when you go to moon and beyond, moon is beyond the or out of the Earth's magnetic envelope or magnetosphere as you call it. So on the moon as well as Mars, one would be subjected to what is called as galactic cosmic radiations. Galactic cosmic radiations and the electrons, the protons that are getting fired from the sun, and particularly becomes risky at the time of solar flare. So when the sun is bursting out, and if you fall in the fire zone, these are deeply penetrative. They quickly penetrate through the tissue and do the damage. And that's the reason why just the day before you must have come across the news of a particular solar flare. Alright, huge solar flare, no threat to Artemis II astronaut launch to the moon, NASA says. So there were some questions getting asked, like this solar flare and the galactic cosmic rays, would it not be harmful to the people who are going at this time? So they said no, that the launch window is selected such that that flare phase is not falling on our mission. This is what NASA has to suggest. There were many news. This is one that came in the Times of India just yesterday. Massive X 1.4 solar flare erupts. Solar flares are categorized into different types based on the frequency and the intensity. So you can see they are called B type, C type, M type and X type. X is the most intense solar flare and hence most damaging. Prelims, you could largely face this question. So B, C, M and X type. So X type solar flare were observed, and hence there were kind of a bit of anxiety as to should the Artemis II mission be deferred. But NASA suggested that no, it is not coming in the fire zone because of the launch window which is coming after this solar flare has happened in that region. Anyway, but that remains a realistic challenge every time you go, because going on the Mars and staying longer and less of the atmospheric protection, that will be a bigger danger. So what we have now looked at are the different challenges associated with the human space missions. Let us now look into some of the geopolitical aspects quickly. People, in the name of space governance or space laws, there are few treaties that were brought up by United Nations way back, and in the 60s and 70s, when the number of countries which were spacefaring were very less, and it was largely guided by the Cold War situation back then and the technology that were available back then. We have come far ahead from there, and hence all of these space laws are largely archaic and are not very impactful, if at all. The major ones are Outer Space Treaty, the Liability Convention, Outer Space Treaty that was signed in 1967, Rescue Agreement, which is where the different participating bodies, they commit to conduct the rescue operations if a particular mission of a nation is in danger, or maybe an astronaut has gone missing in the space. The Outer Space Treaty particularly largely is a moral suasion without any enforceable aspect into it, which talks about the entire space is a common property of mankind and no nation can do appropriation of the property associated with the space to themselves. So there is no sovereign restriction that a nation can put on the property of the space. But again, as I told you, that there is no clarity on the private bodies, how are they going to be dealt here, and there is no mechanism of enforcing that in case of violation. So at the best, they are moral suasions as we call it. So it is like a nation would not do it only because they don't want to be pictured unethical. And the times that we live in, that could be something which might not be abided by in true spirit. Liability convention, so the country whose object does damage to the another country's object in the space is something the country would be responsible to pay for it. Registration convention, which says that for whatever object that you're sending in the space, you have to get the details of it, the purpose, the instruments, the placement, everything registered with the United Nations. And then the Moon Treaty. That's interesting, people, because once Outer Space Treaty is there, why is the Moon Treaty required to be created in addition? Because Moon is anyway a part of the outer space, which is also to reflect after the Apollo missions happened, people. There was a particular, narrative that Moon is going to be the place wherein after the Earth, there will be fight for claiming the resources. As it is believed today also, as we are getting closer towards establishing the base on the Moon, that the one who controls the Moon controls the Earth. You will get the best of the view of the Earth. You will get the limitless resource, at least by your present need. So Moon Treaty says almost the same things of the Outer Space Treaty with respect to the Moon in particular. So says that the resources of the Moon are a common property of the entire world. And you see, interestingly, all the major powers who have the technology to even claim the right of appropriation are not the signatories to this. Moon Treaty signatories does not include Russia, does not include US, does not include China. Recently in 2023, Saudi Arabia also walked out of it. India has signed it but not ratified it. So Moon Treaty is observed more in disobedience rather than as a force to reckon with. So people, what we now have is the space laws have largely become outdated. At the same time, because they could not make clear distinction between the state and the private entities, you see over the last many years, many of the countries have had the tendencies of coming out with the national laws whereby they are allowing their private organizations to get more claim and do more activity. And that's one of the reasons why over the last few years, NASA's budget has been getting reduced. And you see that US has come out with many laws that allow their private bodies to go and do mining and the other activities in the space. In 2015, they came out with Asteroid Act, which allows them to do mining on the asteroid and the other bodies. So here is a quick look at all the countries which have their national legislation, which somewhere or the other is allowing their private entities to do more extraction of the material from the Moon asteroid and the other places. US, UK, France, Japan, Luxembourg. Rather, Luxembourg was the first European, in the Europe to give the legal certain, sanction to the mining activity on the Moon. And UAE, Russia, Australia, they all have their legislations whereby the private entities, they get the right to go and do the mining. There's nothing in the present laws that can forbid them from that. And from this, the kind of friction that we are gradually moving towards, the two blocks are getting formed, where in 2017, US came up with what is called as Artemis Accord. So when you get the question, please remember Artemis mission and Artemis Accord should be properly, distinctly understood as different things. So Artemis Accord is a multilateral agreement between the nations towards some common principles of space exploration and exploitation. This is led by US and has around 61 nations as of now. Is India a signatory to the Artemis Accord? Yes. We became the 27th signatory to the Artemis Accord in 2023. What does it enjoin us to? Artemis Accord have got some major principles of existing in the space, with few particular references that we could have for the Moon also. It talks about transparency. All the signatories are bound under this accord to maintain the transparency with respect to the missions that they are conducting. Next, sharing of the information. For all the scientific exercises that they are conducting, they should share the informations that they generate in a way that will be quite beneficial. So, will Artemis II findings or Artemis III as it goes on finding will be shared? Kind of yes. It also talks about interoperability, whereby your tools, your programs, your devices should be interoperable, compatible with each other. So, this is an extremely important aspect of it, interoperability. So, as I said, your technology, your missions should be compatible with each other, right? Whereby India, you can understand, would find it a bit difficult because we have had past collaborations with Russians, and hence our technology has evolved more compatible with their system as well. Even for the upcoming Gaganyaan, you see, our astronauts have undergone training with the Russians. So, the good thing is Artemis Accord is non-binding, right? So, it is going to be voluntary. So, would India still have the space of exercising its strategic autonomy? Well, that's a question that we look into. So, interoperability. One aspect is deconfliction of the missions. So, transparency, sharing the information, interoperability of your technology and missions, and then deconfliction. What deconfliction simply means, people, is that all the nations should respect each other's mission and the places wherein they are operating, and they should not come in conflict for the same place. Whereby it also talks about the creation of safety zones. Safety zones, which says that if, let us say, US has claimed a particular area in a particular mission, that entire area would be the safety zone wherein if India conducts a mission should not interfere. Now, this is where these things get tricky. I hope the listeners can easily understand that all of these agreements are giving the capable technologies a straight advantage, right? So, they will start claiming more and more. So, are Russia, China and many other nations also signatory to this? The answer is no. So, they have their own kind of association building up, wherein Russia and China are working towards International Lunar Research Station. And this is what our talk initially started. How much of it is geopolitical gesturing, and how much is the geopolitical consequences? What are we entering towards? And what part of it is pure scientific as such? So there is a clear division of the blocks that we have. ILRS, International Lunar Research Station, where I'll show you. This map talks about, the blue are the members of the Artemis Accord, and the red ILRS system, where it is still not factually or formally known, but under the International Lunar Research Station initiative, China and Russia and many others who might also join, like Venezuela, South Africa, Azerbaijan, Pakistan and so on, they'll be working towards establishing the station around the moon, which was similar in concept to the gateway that of NASA, or it could be the base camp established on the moon dependent upon in situ resource utilization for longer stay of the mankind. So what we see that there is clear grouping in this. There is no particular law or legislation of the world which is enforceable to ensure the deconfliction in the true spirit if the situation comes to. So you must remember that we have to collectively work towards evolving the otherwise archaic and ineffective outer space laws that we have had over the last many decades. The start of Artemis is also a clarion call for that. People, there is another challenge that comes up with the private entities getting more of the share in the space activities. Read this news. In the ongoing Russia-Ukraine crisis, the Starlink satellites availability were not made available to the Russian military exercises, which Ukraine held as the, big thing and as a good thing. At the same time, in 2023, a similar situation had happened in Crimea, where Elon Musk had withheld the Starlink from the Ukrainians, wherein they wanted to go for an attack against the Russia in Crimea. And as the story goes, that Elon Musk had the back channel communication, got to understand that this may flare up, and he rather avoided escalation, as the news also reported. What we are witnessing, the geopolity would now become also revolving towards the private players, which is going to be extra volatile and dynamically evolving situation. The activities of the private companies of specific nations may in future also become the reason for escalation of the frictions between the different countries. All the more a reason that we need to fast evolve the laws. With respect to India, you should remember that we are not having our space program governed under some specific law when it comes to private participation. So we still don't have any specific legislation. The need of it is felt, the maximum like never before. And towards that, for many years now, and the talks are happening that it could be tabled soon, we have the new Space Activities Bill, which seems to have been drafted already, which talks about the do's and don'ts, the license, what will be the requirements for the private, players, as the foreign, players also want to, invest. What will be the safeguards allowed with respect to the insurance, how the intellectual property matters would be handled. All of these are getting, drafted under this and could soon be tabled, and it will become a part of the common consumption, which has been there in the news in the recent past. So you must keep your radar on for that as well. So the center finalizes space bill to boost private sector, give in space a statutory powers. In space was constituted after the National Space Policy 2023, also made it clear that the private players have to be given a free, a kind of or an open field to exercise their activities. In space, Indian National Space Promotion and Authorization Center is the body which is going to authorize the different missions and programs of the private companies before they get, to be active. So under this bill, now InSpace would be declared as the statutory body, and it will have the further more power to exercise the national interest. They're at the same time expanding the economic activities. Towards that, there was one particular news that came up March 27th, just 3 days back, people, where a standing parliamentary committee report on the space had brought out that many of the technologies of ISRO are being sold to the private companies at a much lower price possibly than what they could claim. Now this is, debatable, but then India is also in a kind of a tricky situation where, as I just told you, that US's adventures are possible primarily because their entire architecture depends upon the multiple private players. So India is in a situation wherein on one side they have to develop new technologies, at the other side we have to create a good functional private, space ecosystem, whereby making the technologies available to them easier could be under that, I would say, ideology, wherein we are trying to make the private companies come of age much quicker. At this point in time, there are over 400 startups in India which are active. Some of them could certainly be scalable to a much greater size. Many are coming out with their beautiful innovations. But yes, with ISRO also playing its role, that could just expedite the entire process. So I hope you understand that Artemis mission is not just going to be a solo mission. It is possibly going to be a start of a big space race that we are entering towards. There are a few other news that before we end, I would like to share, like Elon Musk also, he has been very enthusiastic and ambitious about his Mars mission. But in the recent past, he has also said that he will be focusing on the moon prior to Mars, whereby the importance of moon could be understood with respect to testing before we ultimately make a giant leap for the Mars. So that's one. There was another news that came January this year that they have found a place on Mars, generally near the north hemisphere, wherein they are finding that this could be a good place for human landing in future, if at all. Well, meanwhile, you must have also come across this news of NASA also going for its first Mars bound spacecraft. Mars bound spacecraft, which will be for the first time powered by nuclear propulsion. And let me tell you, nuclear propulsion is going to be extremely critical technology for going to far off distances, particularly interplanetary, as the Mars mission would be, because the nuclear propulsion will generate much more thrust for a quicker journey. Because one of the biggest challenge of conducting the Mars mission, as I told in the earlier part of the lecture also, is the duration of the journey. So if you're taking months, that will be the biggest demerit. So this nuclear propulsion powered spacecraft will be lifted, and the name of that spacecraft is Space Reactor Freedom 1. So please remember, that could be UPSC relevant. What is Space Reactor Freedom 1? This is going to be the first nuclear propelled spacecraft of NASA for the Mars in the coming time. So, and look at some of the other aspects, people. This is, just as I was talking about in situ resource utilization, you see why it is so important, because otherwise carrying just 1 liter of water to the low Earth orbit, the space station costs nearly $25,000. And if you are taking it to the moon, it could go beyond $1 million, just 1 liter of water. And for the Mars, of course, is a different ball game altogether, over $3 million. So finding the resource there itself is going to be extremely important. With respect to the need for evolving the law which is enforceable, because as we see that the America, China, Russia, they are chasing the moon like never before, the chances of the space getting militarized is quite prominent, as we may also see that many of the capable nations, including India or US, China, Russia, France and all, they have got dedicated space command in their military. And it certainly reflects that we fear that there could be war in the space in future. Macron warns of brutalization of space warfare and unveils France's new strategy. So they are also waking up. He has been quite vocal about it. Look at this. This came up this month that has gone by, March. Chinese satellites practicing dogfights in space, claims top US general. So that was again charged by US. So they keep putting charges against each other. China seriously concerned over US Golden Dome defense system, which is going to also include the space assets, right? So what we see is this is a real risk. So India must use its inertia to play an important role while maintaining its strategic autonomy like it has in the future. Like recently when there was a resolution that was getting passed against anti-satellite technology, India abstained from voting, right? So India has been criticized earlier also for having conducted the anti-satellite test, but we did abstain from voting. In a way, we avoided falling in line with the diktats of some of the other powers. So good that we are walking the balanced path. So that much for the Artemis. This is the image trying to show you what a lander which will take the humans on the moon could look like. It is going to be what is called as the Human Landing System, HLS Starship. This is one of the most powerful rocket that is getting developed by the SpaceX, and that in future would be the one that will be responsible for bringing, so you can see through this particular image, you see, just as we are conducting the Artemis II mission this time, so imagine from the Earth the Orion spacecraft will be going, and it will go and dock with the HLS human landing system Starship rocket, and after having docked with it, the humans would be made to land on the moon, as I did show in this particular image. So interesting times ahead. Let us all keep our radars on to only keep picking the exam relevant aspects. So I feel there could be questions on human space missions, the new rigor in that, the challenges, the opportunities, and the laws and the regulations. So you can prepare around these areas. Let us all witness the history being made tonight. There are many individuals who are waiting, and interestingly, some of the news have been there around, like from Apollo 11 mission, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. So Buzz Aldrin is the oldest individual, or the only one left from that particular mission, who is very excited about watching the Artemis II, kind of making him feel deja vu. So good. I mean, Apollo's impatient old timers are rooting for NASA's return to the moon with Artemis II launch. So this is SLS, as I talked about. So this is, people, the Kennedy Space Center, Florida. So this is the 39B launch pad from where the takeoff will happen. This is the launch vehicle assembly point. So good. That is all for today's discussion. I hope that you have found it relevant. We will keep discussing as the Artemis subsequent missions also come, right? So this is just a cross section. This is the cryogenic fuel chamber. So the hydrogen and oxygen, and this is the interim cryogenic propulsion system that will take the Orion into the translunar trajectory. All right.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
But this time, the goal is not flags and footprints. This time, the goal is to stay. Today, we are providing a demand signal for frequent crewed missions well beyond Artemis V. We intend to work with no fewer than 2 launch providers, with the aim of crewed landings every 6 months, with additional opportunities for new entrants in the years ahead. America will never again give up the moon.
So that is all. Thank you. Have a good day.